Hey guys, I'm vegan. I engage in a lot of criticism of what's going on in veganism as a movement, not because I want veganism to fail, but because I want it to succeed. I don't think that film critics criticize films because they want the film industry to collapse or fail. They want to see the progress of the art form. They, in general, want the industry to succeed, to do better, to make more meaningful films, maybe, to make more successful films. They want to see people's creative visions realized. I don't know, whatever mix of motives they bring to film criticism. But political criticism is indeed a very different thing. But as of right now, 2018, I have made 17 videos criticizing Direct Action Everywhere, and I have never once dealt with the very open sex scandals going on within that organization. Today's the day. Today's the day we finally address that here on this channel. I've never once dealt with the looming, odious cloud of controversy that surrounds the fact that many people within the organization signed non-disclosure agreements. Some of them maybe felt they were forced to sign non-disclosure agreements, or they signed them and regretted them. But in any case, Direct Action Everywhere is it's founded and led by a corporate lawyer, Hsiung, and he has a habit of asking people to sign non-disclosure agreements, which is one of the reasons why it's so hard to get someone on camera to talk about what's going on inside the organization, what's right with it, what's wrong with it, what the road to the future is. But look, guys, I just reiterate, right off the bat, I'm engaged in this criticism because I want to learn from the successes and failures of various things going on within the vegan movement. Now, in some ways, Direct Action Everywhere is a success story. They claim currently to have 100,000 members. I would say the word member might not be so appropriate. Maybe they have 100,000 people who are signed up for their email list, who are supporters in the sense of following them on social media, know what they want to do. When I look at their YouTube channel, I don't see signs of 100,000 people who are even interested in seeing one video a month out of them. Not even when their videos are indeed right on their core message. I mean, these videos are just telling people stuff they already want to hear. They rescued a cute baby goat. They're protesting against people wearing fur. They're against Trader Joe's eggs. I mean, this stuff is all preaching to the converted. I don't do that kind of stuff on my channel. People come to my channel and they watch videos that tell them, horrifying, unfamiliar, provocative things they don't want to hear. I mean, I remember getting hate mail because of what I had to say about video games. I told people that playing video games was not a good use of their time. People were shocked and horrified, and people unfollowed me and said they didn't want to ever watch my videos again because of my political position on video games. Certainly, in a major way, I had people respond very negatively to what I said about marijuana. Marijuana causes brain damage, and there is scientific evidence to prove this fact. I would encourage you to not use marijuana. Even this is controversial. But sure, within the vegan movement, I've criticized a long list of, to my mind, important political issues. I've crossed swords with other aspiring vegan activists and leaders in the movement. I've disagreed with them on different things. And yet, I seem to pull in, an interested core of at least 500 viewers. And what I see with Direct Action Everywhere is that even the core of people who still supports them, they don't really want to hear what Direct Action Everywhere has to say anymore. So, they maybe have 100,000 supporters in some sense. They have a certain level of donations and budget. I mean, that's part of the controversy today. It's a proven fact. They're getting a certain amount of money donated to them every year. So they have the capacity to make some difference in the world. They have the capacity to organize certain types of events. But let's face it, this movement kicked off with the slogan, "It's not food, it's violence," and with tactics that are based around disruption as they defined it, and it gets old. It gets old quick. It gets repetitive. And for many of the people engaged in the tactics, I know it gets exhausting and heartbreaking. I had a conversation, the realest conversation I ever had, with Hsiung. Hsiung's YouTube channel is called Hsiung Mania. A lot of you will know her. She became like a lifestyle blogger within veganism, but back in the day, she used to do real street protests. And she said, after you've done it 100 times, remember her talking to me about just her sense of being morally and emotionally exhausted. and feeling that it doesn't make any difference in the world. But anyway, interestingly, that's really what DxE was founded on. They started with the premise that giving out cookies to people on the streets was not effective. Handing out pamphlets on campuses was not effective. And they were going to learn the lessons of the social sciences and take on radically new and more effective methods, such as running into a Chipotle restaurant and screaming, "It's not food, it's violence," such as breaking down weeping in a butcher shop and demanding that the butcher kills you instead of killing the pig, such as running onto a baseball diamond to interrupt a baseball game because people are eating hot dogs at a baseball game, or maybe because they use leather mitts. I mean, I don't know. Baseball is a bit of a soft target for veganism when you think about it, such as trying to interrupt Bernie Sanders, such as trying to interrupt, on and on. I mean, this is their style of disruption. Now, interestingly, this is one of the things that brings us to today's topic. Wayne Hsiung was himself disrupted when he was giving a talk recently, and he posted the videotape of this to his own Facebook page. So two very controversial hour-long videos, both approximately an hour long, went up on the Direct Action Everywhere Facebook pages lately. To my knowledge, they are not on YouTube anywhere, and I do suppose they choose to do that so that they'll have fewer response videos, fewer people editing clips of the video and reacting to it. Now, to my knowledge, the first of these two videos that went up, this is not the one where Wayne is interrupted and disrupted, they decided to do a semi-spontaneous sort of Q&A session talking to the crowd that opens with the statement that Direct Action Everywhere is not a cult. So within the first 2 minutes, I think it's a minute and 30 seconds in, a minute 45 in, I did actually take notes. I did listen to all of these videos in their entirety while studying Chinese. If you guys wonder, how can I possibly make the time to listen to hours and hours of this stuff from Direct Action Everywhere? Learning Chinese, that's a time-consuming hobby, and you can listen to a lot of podcasts while you're doing it, this sort of thing. Anyway, so right off the bat, they kicked off this video by saying that they were going to address concerns that they were a cult. And actually, in large part, the way they addressed that was in describing how their own leadership selection process took place, how they make decisions about what they're going to do in terms of public protests, and trying to kind of reassure people that the social gatherings they have are alcohol-free. They said several times there's a grandmotherly atmosphere. It's not a lot of people trying to get laid. They kind of joked around a lot about the extent to which Wayne's leadership is not at all cult-like or not too cult-like. So they tried to be reassuring, but I think they were not at all addressing people's real concerns. They were not addressing the reasons why people accuse them of being cult-like. Now, about 40 minutes into the video, we had the hilarious statement from one of the chief organizers sitting next to Wayne Hsiung. She said that, quote, I'm sorry, this is a quote, but I'm slightly paraphrasing because she interrupts herself. She doesn't quite speak in a proper sense here. But paraphrasing, ever so slightly, she said, quote, "It's not like we voted ourselves into office," i.e. they really were elected. It's not like only 5 people voted or something. I don't know, 40 to 60 people. I don't know off the top of my head. 40 to 60 people voted us into office. So the exact quote and the timestamp I posted on Twitter. I posted to at least a group somewhere on Facebook. And I posted it for my Patreon subscribers and then Patreon. So this is an organization with allegedly over 100,000 followers. And they're here defending the legitimacy of their leadership. And, of course, that they're not a cult. By saying that maybe 40 people, maybe up to 60, but 40 people, I mean, in a room, voted for who's in charge of leadership. Now, this doesn't contradict the other accounts I've been given about what's gone wrong with the leadership process, with the democratic process at Direct Action. It confirms it. You know, the complaints were that basically in response to rising criticism of Wayne's leadership, he stage managed a very small meeting with a very small number of people who were hand selected, where everyone kind of knew who they were going to support, which side they were on. And at this meeting, so Wayne's leadership was confirmed, and in general the direction and character of the organization was confirmed. Now also legally and financially, Direct Action Everywhere exists as 2 bank accounts, one of which is called DxE Global, which is sometimes also referred to as DxE International. And that account is controlled by Wayne. And there is one other account, which is based in Santa Cruz, California, which is called Friends of DxE, and that is legally controlled by Wayne's sister. So among the complaints, kind of like, well, you can have all the democracy you want, but Wayne is the self-appointed dictator for life. This is the complaint. There is no possibility of actually changing the leadership at the top, and there's definitely no possibility of financial transparency and accountability. Now, sorry, I'm saying this as shorthand. If you think this is an unreasonable criticism, you can refer to my earlier videos that talk about what the issues are. And Wayne did address here, not for the first time, I think, complaints that if you donate to Direct Action Everywhere, because they've had calls for donations that, for example, show you a picture of a pig that's been rescued and say donate to support this pig being in a shelter. And it does indeed seem, no matter how you do the math, less than 15% of your money could possibly go to supporting these animals in shelters. Based on what I've read and based even on what I've heard Wayne say, I believe it can be quite a bit less, like not just slightly less than 15%, but really significantly less. A very, very small percentage of the money you're donating is going to help animals in shelters. Now, is that a problem? Well, it depends. It depends on transparency and accountability and messaging. If you're calling for donations, if you're making these appeals to people on the basis of showing them pictures of pigs in a shed, rescued pigs, and saying this is going to go to support animals in shelters, that's a very different thing from saying, hey, donate so that our members can live in group housing in Berkeley, California, not a cult, hashtag not a cult, so that we can pay them honorariums, not employees with a contract, not that they have Social Security and a salary, not that they have to live up to a professional code of conduct or that they go through a vetting process or a hiring process, not that there's any professionalism. No. They're just being paid in fellowships and honorariums so that they can live as professional dissidents in this movement in Berkeley, California. If you're supporting the lifestyle of these activists, if that's what you know you're doing, that's what you're paying for, if you're paying for them to hang out at this funny little vegan corner shop that they operate out of the same budget, they call it, of course, an activist center, but I've now seen a little bit of videotape and photographs of what that place looks like. Their Berkeley Center for Animal Activism, it looks like a little miniature vegan grocery store, a little vegan corner store. If that's what you're paying to support, and you know that, then, there's no reason why you'd be scandalized by this being less than 15% of the budget. But anyway, already here, scattershot, you get the point that they uploaded a video over an hour long, which was indeed trying to reassure people, that, in their own words, that they're not a cult. That was first and foremost. Secondly, to reassure people about misgivings that they are not sufficiently democratic or transparent, including the issue of elections. And thirdly, that financially, they're on the level that there hasn't been something misleading or inappropriate about what's been happening to the money. In particular, the question of what percentage of the money has been going to actually support rescued animals or the rescue of animals or animals living in shelters. So the second video, to my knowledge, the second video that was uploaded in chronological order, the second video that happened, Wayne is giving a presentation on a sort of standard grist-for-the-mill topic for vegans, which is completely uncontroversial, and he is himself disrupted. Someone stands up from the audience and disrupts his lecture and starts demanding justice. This is 7 minutes into the video, by the way. I shared this link with some people, and they were like, what? Why should I watch this? This is just another boring lecture about veganism. It's the same thing I've heard 10 times. Where I said, no. Fast forward to 7 minutes in. You'll see why I shared you this link. Someone stands up and demands accountability from Wayne about a controversy that I've indeed heard about for quite a long time from many different angles, involving the sex lives of people within Direct Action Everywhere, allegations of rape, a reconciliation process that concluded with people signing non-disclosure agreements, and then what's currently some kind of ongoing lawsuit, some kind of ongoing legal action that arose out of allegations of rape. So both videos dealt with this, actually. The first video, in which they're establishing that they're not a cult, we're told at quite some length that Wayne regrets that in the past these truth and reconciliation processes had been in the hands of amateurs, and that in the future what they're going to do is hand over any complaints about sexual misconduct to a professional, someone who's a professional in the field of handling these types of complaints. And they will just send out an alert through their network that someone is a sexual predator or is guilty of some kind of offense. Now, already there, when he said that, I thought, oh, have you thought through that this could lead to lawsuits? I mean, if you just send out an email to your 100,000 followers, your 100,000 subscribers, saying, for example, that somebody is a rapist, that can lead to a very serious lawsuit, because that could have devastating consequences on their lives, professionally, personally, and otherwise. And under American law, you are impugning their chastity, which lowers or basically eliminates the burden of proof, unlike other forms of defamation in America. When they're of a sexual nature of that kind, it's quite easy to prove defamation. And anyway, as some of you who followed this channel for some time may know, I had a dispute with another leader in the vegan movement. He didn't have a leg to stand on in criticizing me, so he just made up a story that I was having an affair with a 16-year-old, and the 16-year-old, female by the way, she and I had never met. We'd never spoken. So it was a ridiculous... And she never claimed anything of the sort. She openly on her own blog at the time was like, no, she'd never met me. This was complete nonsense. So there was absolutely there was nothing about this to make this credible. But nevertheless, that was a very nasty conflict, and that also ended up in court. Could have ended up in the boxing ring, but for some reason, even though that guy threatened to beat me up and indeed threatened to have me stabbed or kill me, there were a lot of threats from his end, but when I offered to meet him, he was a no-show. All right, that's another story, but my point is in mentioning it here. Sadly, these kinds of allegations of sexual misconduct, they are used to discredit political figures. We just had that happen in the province of Ontario in Canada. So in Ontario, Canada, the Conservative Party leader, there were some allegations made that fell apart on just cursory inspection and fact-checking that were used to try to destroy his political career. Patty Brown, whom I, in fact, went to primary school with. So the leader, or the would-be leader of the Conservative Party in Ontario just had that. I knew him as a child. And, allegations were contrived against him to destroy him politically, I think to destroy him personally to some extent too. So this is a real problem in politics, and vegan politics are real politics. So in any case, Wayne was dramatically disrupted by this young woman who stands up. And if you go to see the video, I mean, I'll provide timestamps below for some of the bizarre, in the description below this video, there will be links with timestamps to some of these more explosive and bizarre statements. One of the strangest things, again, in contrast to this claim that hashtag we are not a cult, Wayne repeatedly says, I love you, I care about you. He repeatedly says that he's given this woman money, that he'd like to give her more money, that he's helping to pay for her to go to graduate school, that he cares about her. I think maybe twice he brings up the fact that he's a Buddhist, that he was raised Buddhist, and he believes in various Buddhist virtues. You could have fooled me, Wayne. I don't know. I think you were raised as a corporate lawyer who goes around having these people sign non-disclosure agreements. I don't know which one is more your religion today, Wayne. You never... I'm a former scholar of Theravada Buddhism. I actually learned to read Pali. I read the canon. And I've meditated with Buddhist monks from, Sri Lanka to New York State, Cambodia to Thailand. But, but you could have fooled me, Wayne. I don't see a whole lot of Buddhist influence in your act at any level or at any stage of your career, Wayne. But anyway, he invokes his religious background as a Buddhist. He makes these statements that he cares about her, and that at one point, he says repeatedly that he's broke, that he has no money. And she several times rebuts him by saying that's just not true. I also would tend to assume that's not true under these circumstances. And he says, no, it is true that he's broke. He has no money. But he says that if he had money, he would give more money to her. He said if he had $1 billion, he would give her $1 million at one point. These are pretty close paraphrases of what was said, and you can hear it yourself. So there are repeated assurances that Wayne cares about her and cares about her perspective and cares about her opinion, that he wants to support her and even that he loves her and so on. But, and there seems to be a but, what she's demanding is that the lawsuit against her be dropped. And of course, Wayne has to say that's not in his power. He's not the one pressing the lawsuit. And what she insists on is that Wayne himself advised or counseled or encouraged the man who is pressing the lawsuit to do so. Now, I have heard things from other people who are not even 6 degrees of separation removed from this scandal. I've heard things from people who are 1 degree of separate, people who are connected to the people involved. The world is not that broad, and the internet makes it narrower, and gossip, travels more quickly. I've managed to get through 17 very substantive videos criticizing what's wrong with Direct Action Everywhere without even once commenting on the sex scandal side of their story. And this is really linked. The sex scandal, the issue of these legal costs, because again, this young one was also talking about the cost of the lawyers. Wayne was talking about the cost of the lawyers, but also the cost of her going to grad school. And the allegations of Direct Action Everywhere being a cult. I've formally studied cults. I have some articles on the internet talking about that. The extent to which Buddhism itself can become cult-like or an outright cult. The extent to which political ideologies like communism can become cult-like. Pardon me. Lapsing into Chinese here. I do not think by a formal, strict definition of cult, I do not think anyone really can call Direct Action Everywhere a cult. However, on the other hand, people refer to being a fan of Star Trek as a cult. So there is a broader, more informal use of the word cult that's in currency, and I can't pretend people don't use the English language that way. However, strictly speaking, no, I would not describe Direct Action Everywhere as a cult. However, what's very clear from both of these videos is that people do regard Wayne Hsiung as responsible for the moral minutiae of the lives of his followers. They regard him as if it is in his power and it is his responsibility to censor, expurgate, and manage what's on everybody's Facebook wall, what's in everybody's hearts of hearts, what are their beliefs, how politically correct they are, how racist they are, etc., down to a very fine, precise level of scrutiny. And in effect, that he's put in the position of managing their sex lives. Some of the examples I've read about, people date, people break up, they have acrimonious breakups, people sleep with other people within the movement. A lot of people, I've heard Henya herself admit this on camera. Kenya Mania has admitted on camera that she used to go to protests to meet guys to get laid. A lot of people will admit that to you, that one of their reasons for going to vegan events, whether it's a food-based event like Veg Fest or it's an explicitly political event, that one of the reasons for going to these things is indeed to meet members of the opposite sex or members of the same sex, depending on what they're into. So yeah, people fall into love, people fall out of love. There are acrimonious breakups, and sometimes along with that, there are allegations and counter-allegations. Some of them are true, and some of them are false. But tell me something, guys. Why would you want your boss at work to be involved? If you go through that, most people watching this video have been through a bad breakup. Did you go to your boss at work and get him involved? Is the status of Wayne Hsiung in this movement that of being a boss at work? Or is he indeed more like a priest? Is he more like the leader of this flock? Is he the pastor looking over his flock of sheep? What really is going on here? Naturally, my videos tend to criticize leadership because it's the leaders who make the decisions. But ultimately, the problem here is followership. Anyone who's been seriously engaged in a critique of what's right and what's wrong with Direct Action Everywhere has to come to the conclusion that a large part of what's wrong with it is that these guys put up a flag, and that flag attracts a certain kind of person. And you see, when you're recruiting for this kind of movement, what kind of person do you want to show up? What kind of person do you want to participate? Well, they've got exactly what they asked for. They asked for a certain type of personality that wants to disrupt baseball games and weep and cry in restaurants, that wants to pitch a fit and kick down doors. And Wayne has now repeatedly said that he's facing 10 years in prison. It's hard to say if he's boasting or complaining, but he's repeatedly said in these same links you'll see below that he may do 10 years in jail for his proffered type of activism. So you're asking people to sign up to do things that are illegal, that can get them in legal trouble, that can put them in prison. You're promising them a certain alluring combination of danger and save the world rhetoric. One of the distinctive things about Direct Action Everywhere is that they claim there will be no compromise. In reality, they have compromised. They protest in front of a butcher, and then the butcher says, look, what can I do to end these protests? They say, okay, put up a tiny little placard. A tiny little placard like this, put it up on the wall, saying that eating meat is immoral, basically, that it's not food, it's violence, and then we'll stop the protest. That sounds like compromise to me, Wayne. That sounds like your logo is being used to endorse a butcher shop, to give a stamp of ethical approval to a butcher shop, or at least to get a jail-free card to a butcher shop, where you said you'd never compromise. You said it was about you wouldn't compromise until all the animals are free, till every cage is smashed, till they're all liberated. But anyway, the uncompromising, slightly menacing, slightly violent, utterly illegal, overly emotive methods that are used here. They're an embarrassment to veganism. I've already had videos criticizing that. But also, they create a crossroads that attracts certain types of people. And then Wayne has put himself in the position of, first and foremost, trying to exploit those people for fundraising. That's what it all comes down to. How are you going to monetize the antics of these freaks? How are you going to put on a freak show that's going to get donor money rolling in? That's the challenge he's got. And you see how it plays out. Again, in these same videos, you see them talking about how they brainstormed. Oh, should we have this protester lie down in a pile of poo, in a pile of feces, a pile of, animal excrement? Yeah, is that going to work or not? And then they're so happy that they got on the TV news or got into some newspapers with this stunt. I'm sorry, but in any other industry, this would be called fame whoring. This isn't effective activism. This isn't basing your judgments and your strategies and tactics on the lessons of the social sciences. This isn't anything of the kind. What you're doing is fame whoring. What you're doing is trying to get on camera, get on YouTube, and get into the newspapers. The antics of these people you've recruited and attracted, again, with these peculiar promises, with this uncompromising, quote-unquote direct action for a methodology that's built on disruption and overly emotive outbursts. And then once you've got those people there and they're breaking into factory farms and they're kicking in the doors of restaurants and weeping at fur shops and Chipotle and, once you've got these people and that's the cycle of, public protests they've engaged in, how are you going to manage them? What Wayne has shown us again from many different angles in these videos, it's very, very hard for him to manage. And in many ways, what they've done is they've had to retrench themselves. They used to be a decentralized, you can still look this up, the archived web pages where they used to promise this. They used to promise that they would be a fully decentralized, fully horizontal, grassroots, activist network where nobody was in charge. Leaderless resistance was their model. And they've switched to being ultra hierarchical, ultra top down. They claim they have elections. Maybe 40 to 60 people vote in those elections. It is very clear that Wayne Hsiung is the one man at the top of the tower trying to manage everything his followers do. Their private political beliefs, their private sex lives, when they get into fights with one another. He's trying to provide them with housing in Berkeley, California, that he complains is very expensive. He's trying to shepherd them along towards this revolution and trying to raise enough money to keep paying wages to the staff, to the coterie of his closest followers who stay with him there in Berkeley. What can we learn from Direct Action Everywhere? What can we learn from their successes? What can we learn from their failures? We live in an era when politics is dominated. Pardon me. We live in an era when politics is dominated by figures preaching compromise. It can be very appealing. It can build up a lot of interest when you preach a creed that rejects all compromise. You can preach it, and then we all get to see whether or not you can practice what you preach. Hsiung, as he boasts himself, is now facing 10 years in jail. I don't think he even claims he's not guilty. I don't think he can claim he's innocent. I think he can just claim that he wants to commit these crimes, film them, put the evidence of him committing the crime on the internet, have people watch that film, and donate money to support him committing more crimes. I think that's his moral position. I don't think DxE is going to collapse. I don't think it's going to disappear. People for the ethical treatment of animals, PETA, they've been through a long series of scandals. They've made reforms. They've made adjustments. But one thing with PETA that didn't change is that the same one person, the same self-appointed dictator for life, remained at the helm, remained in control at the top of that organization. I've used this quote many times, but the former director of the FBI said, an organization is the shadow of just one man. One man or one woman, as the case may be. PETA's case, it's Ingrid Newkirk. There are many lessons we can learn from veganism as it's gotten to this point, but I think one of them is obviously the type of tyranny that's inevitable when this type of movement is controlled by just one woman or just one man, even if they have the best of intentions. That when you scale it up to 100,000 people in chapters in Chicago, California, and allegedly around the world, there has got to be a better way. Hsiung, if you really cared about the future of this movement, I think you would have stepped down back when your followers were asking you to. It's not that long ago. Back when you had the mutiny against your leadership. Back when it was so clear across the board that the very people you'd recruited to demand change were looking to you and asking for change within the organization itself.